From the PSIA-AASI satellite studios in Hood River, Oregon, it's so good to be back in Hood River. I'm George Thomas. You are listening to First Chair. And as you can see, we have quite the guest today, Angelo Ross. It is really good to be chatting with you again.
It's been too long, George, but you're so kind with your praise, but it's definitely been too long since we chatted.
Angelo, I wore my skunk shirt just for you.
I see a lot of skunk shirts places I go. Maybe the world's sending me a message.
Well, today we are going to be talking about instructor training. We've got season coming up here, season start beginning. And yeah, I think there's almost a mixed feeling about it at times. One, we're going to see friends that we haven't seen for a few months. Two, we're getting back on snow. And three, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, same thing again. I've got, I go through, I know all this stuff. I've been here for however many years and I've heard these things before and I'm hearing the same jokes. Believe me, I've told the same jokes leading and return instructor training. And there needs to be, and that's kind of the purpose of this series. We're doing a 3-part series on return instructor training. We really need to go into the season, Angelo, with an open mind to learning. And yeah, I started teaching in 1986. It's lifelong learning, but what am I going to get out of return instructor training this year? And I need to open my mind up and think, I can't wait for return instructor training. This is my chance to really pick up on something new, refine some older skills, and really become a better teacher and provide a better guest experience. Mm-hmm. How do you look at that, Angelo?
I agree with you. I'm so right now it's September 12th, and we're gearing up for the early season team training and then some ed staff training around the country that'll start in November. And already I'm super excited to see people that I haven't seen since last winter. Like that social aspect of it is real. But and I agree. I find myself having to remind myself that like learn something. And like it's really easy to fall into that habit of the social part. But I think, the wise among us who intend to get better at the craft will set an intention before those sessions. And yeah, you have to allow yourself to have fun with your friends and enjoy that. That's why we're here. We're also here to get better at the job for the people who pay a lot of money and sacrifice to come take lessons from us. So I think it's about being cognizant of all of it and setting some intentions from the beginning. Like I'm going to enjoy being with these people. I'm going to enjoy learning and getting better at this with these people.
I mean, if I have a closed mind and I'm going back to do something I feel like I've done before, that's about as exciting as going in and getting a root canal, Angelo.
And confirm. Yep. And just coming off a root canal this week, I can tell you, it's absolutely no fun. The closed-minded bit, though, I think back to when I was in a public school, and after a couple of years, this was my experience. After a couple of years, I hit my stride. I didn't feel like I was like treading water to not drown. And after the first couple of years, and you can look around and see more of what's going on. And one of the things that I noticed, maybe I don't know, 4 or 5 years in to being a school teacher, that among the faculty, the older faculty, you could see a real difference between the people who had really kind of shut down and went into habit mode, and they're just, you can see it, you can hear it in the way they talk, and honestly, it seemed like the whole job became a drag for them, versus the older people who were still excited, still finding new ways to do things, willing to throw out old lessons and take a chance on a new one. Like that open-minded, closed-minded thing is very real, and not just in public school, not just in education generally, but in life. Like it's super easy to fall into habits and just get on the treadmill and not really think about what you're doing.
Well, and part of keeping us from doing that you and I believe Dave Schuling are heading out now to go around the country and work with the different ed staffs from each region.
Mhm.
And you're going to be working on some new things that we should be getting some trickle down at our schools that we may be hearing about in return instructor training, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's a big team. Like Dave Schuling and I are definitely involved with it, but like the entire ELC, so that's all of the each director of education from each region in the country is involved. We have a team of what we call alignment training specialists, and some of them are very experienced examiners. Some of them are on the team right now. Some are team alumni. And this crew of I'll call it about 30 people because it's kind of fluid. We will dispatch and go to different regional trainings and make sure that the message is consistent and that people understand, like, specifically changes to the exam process. Yeah, that process is kicking up for sure. And I did have a hand in designing that program. Yeah, but a lot of people have had eyes on it.
Can you share some of what that message is going to be?
Yeah. Any training really should make us better at the job, whether that's a training at a local resort makes people on staff better at teaching their students. And it's the same thing with examiner training. We're just ski instructors, and we happen to throw scores from time to time. So being good at running an assessment or an exam is important. When I say good, I mean observant, knowing what different types of observations are and what they mean, recording that information, comparing it to something objective like our national standards or our performance guides in order to score it, and then communicating that performance and that score back to the candidate who tried so hard in that exam day. So specific to examiner training, like we try to get good at the job of examining. And that's again our focus this year. We're going to focus specifically on the teaching module, which is what we focused on last year. So it's kind of a redo of last year's examiner training, but with some polish. And specifically the polish this year, and this is the part that I played a role in. We're co-examining now at level 2 and 3 in all disciplines. So examiners working together in a 50-50 relationship to make the observation, to set up the day, to make sure the candidates understand the ask, to make the observations, to collaborate on scores equally. And that's really a tall order. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to make sure is perceived, because the perception of it from the candidate's eyes is just as important as the examiner's actually doing it 50-50, right? That's the impression we want to give, because that's what we're trying to accomplish. And so one of our focuses this year is, I produced a document, and again, a lot of people have looked at this and made comments on it, but I produced a document called the Co-Examiner Connection Guide. And it's essentially a list of 16 questions, and they're all geared around different aspects of the exam day or the learning connection. And, for example, if you and I were working an exam together, we would have access to this connection guide beforehand, and we run through it to evaluate ourselves on what our preparation is, what our expectations are going into it, trying to bring to light any biases we might each have. And then before you and I would work that exam, the idea is we sit down with that connection guide together and prep for that day to make sure that we are actually 50-50 partners in that process, and that we're giving the candidates the impression that we're 50-50 partners. So that's a very important piece that we recognize, we've gotten feedback on, and we're responding to that. I'm really excited about that piece of the training.
Just a quick pause to say, you may qualify for a scholarship from the PSIA-AASI Education Foundation. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out on your instructor journey, head to the Professional Development tab on the snowpros.org to learn more and apply now.
Uncomfortable question for you. Is that because I very well remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm with George now, and George he's a hard, just not a. now I get to be with Angelo, and Angelo's amazing. I've heard he's incredible, and he's really going to be working with you. And it was almost not a competition, but there were definitely assessors, examiners that you didn't want to have.
Yeah. Well, historically, over my couple of decades in this association, I remember those stories for sure. And it may have been more real back in the day. Like, examiners had biases, they had things that they did as individuals, and then of course they had their vibe that they gave off. And if you were with a very gruff, large man who was loud and would interrupt during teaching segments or ski away from you if you saw something you didn't like, that gave an impression, didn't it? And
It's
then
intimidating.
versus somebody who was very, very different, who was more, I don't know, subdued in their feedback, more of a listener. And those folks, and this is the challenge with it. Those folks very well could have been evaluating to the same exact standard, just very differently. But we don't know if they were, because the impression was so different. And the beauty of our current process with our curriculum materials and how objective everything is, and the fact that we're using this co-examiner situation as a system, like an internal system of checks and balances, trying to eliminate not only the perception of that difference, but the reality of it too. It may have a place in teaching. Like, there's absolutely a place for subjectivity and those sorts of differences when you're in a teaching or learning mode. But when you've got people in front of you who are in a performance mode and they're trying to earn a credential, there's no place for that. And we know that, and we're eliminating that. That's really the driver behind this idea of working together. It's fairness. That's all. Being fair.
How's that been received?
Very well. I think, I always go back to my public school experience. I co-taught with another teacher for 9 years in my classroom. So I taught for 20. And for my last 9, I co-taught with another teacher. And our district was trying this new co-teaching experiment. We were trained nonstop. I think the first 2 years we worked together as equals in a classroom. We had 3 trainings together each of those first 2 years. And then for the remaining 7, we got together 2 times a year for trainings, just to learn how to give the kids the perception that we were equals in that room. And it was a challenge. I was a biology teacher. My partner was a learning support teacher. Everybody knew that. So all the kids had an assumption coming into the room that I was in charge, and that was just not the reality of the situation. So we went through a lot of trainings to learn how to get rid of that perception. The point I'm trying to make is working together with her and realizing how hard that was, and then like fast forwarding to when we started to do that within this association, it requires some training. So I feel comfortable saying that from the examiner perspective, it's an intimidating notion to be put in a situation where you're expected to be a co-equal with another person without the training to support them. And so I think the major, reaction I've seen and received from this idea is a positive one. Yeah, can we get some training on how to do this better together?
And in conclusion, to wrap up episode 1 of our Return Instructor series, how is this going to help me coming up? I'm not on the ed staff. How is this going to help me this coming season? What am I going to learn from this as an instructor coming in, going up there for this first day of training and the opening trainings that we have throughout the season, however much we get. But what are some things I'm going to be able to learn from this that will make me a better teacher?
Great question, because one of the things that we also are cognizant of is how does this trickle down to the membership and make them better at the job. So while that that co-examining piece may be specific to the audience of people who are running assessments. There are other aspects to the training that will trickle down and hopefully, like Michael Rogan always says, a rising tide lifts all boats. And this is the idea. So in addition to the co-examiner piece this year, we're focusing on note-taking and questioning strategies. And so like with note-taking, for example, as instructors, not just as examiners, but as instructors, we all receive information. There you go. I got your notebook. We all receive information, right? Like this is what we're doing when we teach lessons. We work with this person to establish the goal, and we head off in that direction. And then at some point as the instructor, we all watch to see what's going on. So when I say we're receiving information, that's the specific piece of what we do that I'm talking about. Now, the thing is, one of the issues is some of that information we receive is observational. So for example, if I'm watching a skier or a snowboarder perform, and I see the tail of the gear wash out at some point in the turn, that's something that I make a direct observation with my eyeballs. I can see that, and that's observational information. But we also get non-observational information, like we make inferences, and as an example. And one of the aspects of training this year at the examiner level is, can we distinguish between those types of information we're receiving? And when we are receiving non-observational information, in other words, when I'm making an inference, I need to make a little mental note and say, okay, I'm inferring something that I'm watching George do, and I know I need to now clarify that with a question. Because if I just make a judgment on an inference, there's a pretty high degree of likelihood that's going to be biased. I don't really understand why you're doing what you're doing. So I make a note to myself, and in our debrief or in one of our conversations during the lesson or at the end of the exam segment, for example, George, I observed this. Can you explain what were you thinking? Do you remember that, first of all? And yeah. Can you explain why you did that and what you hope to achieve from that? Just so I understand. And that gives you the opportunity to clarify that inference that you make. Now that's valuable at all levels of teaching. That's not just specific to examiners. So I hope that trickles down to the membership, right? We're going to clarify a bit about the 6-point scale that we use in exams. And I wanted to talk about that specifically for a second. The 6-point scale, when I hear people talk about it, it seems like it's pretty new on the scene, but this has been in our teaching snow sports manual since it was published, and it's about skill development, Fitz and Posner, and how skill development works. As teachers, when we observe performance and we see people like make, for example, we talk about breakthrough moments, right? Breakthrough moments are a red flag, or should be in the eyes of a teacher. That's a moment, a distinct moment when somebody's performance level increases. So it may still be pretty raw, but you can tell that person just had there was some illumination, and they understand the sport differently. Those moments very often correspond within that 6-point scale with those lines between cognitive and associative, for example. Somebody just made that shift in their mental workings from they were in the cognitive zone of skill development, and then all of a sudden now they're in associative. Or it could be from associative to autonomous. But things like breakthrough moments and like that's information that we can use as we evaluate student performance. So we're going to revisit that the language around the 6-point scale at this year's training and put it into terms of like short-term and long-term memory, that like terms that are common but also very relevant to us as educators, so that we can evaluate performance better. And I'm hoping some of that trickles down through the membership, because it's a very practical way to understand something that maybe at this point is understood a little bit academically, trying to bring it more on the snow, right? Out of the textbook onto the snow. So that, to answer your question, those are the sorts of things that we'll be working on, and that I hope trickles down throughout the membership and just makes us all better at observing and then understanding what those observations mean and how to proceed from there. If you think about that from the vantage point of our teaching fundamentals, that's adapting to the changing needs of the learner, right? It's being more direct with that. I'm observing this, not quite sure I understand it. I'm going to get clarity from George on why he's doing that or how he understands this. And now I can select this activity for him to try to see if that helps his understanding increase. That's adapting to changing needs. So it all falls within our fundamental framework and the learning connection. We're just getting pretty specific and refined in our approach right now.
Love it, and really excited about the season coming up.
Me too.
Angelo Ross, always great to visit with you. Looking forward to many more.
Me too, George. Thank you for your time.
From the PSIA-AASI Satellite Studios in Hood River, Oregon, I'm George Thomas.